Welcome to episode 69 of Stage Worthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. You know, a number of years ago, I was at the Montreal Fringe with Keystone Theatre, and on the first day that we were there, the day before we did our tech at the Montreal Fringe, we went to a seminar by solo performer Cameron Moore, and she was talking about how to promote your show at the Fringe. She gave some great advice, but one thing that she said stood out for me. She said, "There's enough audience for everyone." And for me, that one sentence was a transformation, not just in the way that I look at Fringe promotion, but in the way I look at promoting theater in general. See, I believe that this concept, the idea that there's enough audience for everyone, applies to all theater, not just Fringe. Because I think the people who are inclined to see something that I'm producing are likely to be inclined to see something that you're producing. They just have to know about it. Sometimes in theater, and especially in indie theater, we're a little precious with our audiences. It's almost like we treat our audience like they're little birds, and if we open the cage that we keep them in, they'll fly away and never come back. But I think that's completely wrong. I think that an audience who sees the work of one artist will be hungry for the work of other artists. And this doesn't diminish the work of the first artist. It helps everyone grow. I've approached a lot of what I do theatrically with this phrase in mind. There's audience enough for everyone. I'm always happy to talk about other people's productions, even if I have my own in production. And I'm going to continue to do this. It's one of the reasons I started Stageworthy, because I want to expose the work of many artists to as wide an audience as possible. There's enough audience for everyone. And that's my challenge to you this week. Share the work of another artist or company this week. Talk about someone whose work you've enjoyed. Want to tell me about someone's work that I should see? I'd love to hear about it. Want to tell me that I'm completely wrong and don't know what I'm talking about? I'd love to hear that too. You can drop me a line at Facebook and Twitter on StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you like the podcast, I hope you'll consider leaving a comment or rating on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use. Comments help people find the show. My guest this week is Alec Toller. Alec is the director of Circlesnake Productions' Slip, presented at Toronto's Tarragon Theatre Workspace from March 23rd to April 2nd. You've got the new show. It's called Slip. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about? This is not the first time that Slip has been performed. This is like
that's right. This is a remap. We did it in January of 2016 or February, January. Yeah.
So what's Slip about?
Slip is it's okay. So I have to warn you. It's a little tricky to talk about.
Okay.
Because it's a mystery.
Okay. That does present some. What if you were doing the elevator pitch?
No.
What would that be?
Yeah. I have that. Yeah, okay, I just want to warn you that there will be some things I'll be a little cagey about. Because,
sure, absolutely.
There's a twist, and it's fun when it happens.
Okay.
So, it's basically it starts out being a show that's like CSI. It's like a crime scene kind of thing,
and a procedural cop.
Yeah,
is procedural.
Yeah, that's what we start with, and then it ends up being a lot more about emotional internal experiences. It kind of tricks you, which I really like to do. So basically, the show is the audience comes in and you sit on two sides of a corpse and you're in a crime scene.
Okay.
And detectives show up and they start to try and figure it out. But there's too much. It's a really chaotic place. There's a mess everywhere. There's blood. There's like broken glass. Just scrawled papers everywhere. Totally chaotic, and so the detectives are trying to figure it out, but it's so complex it kind of escapes finding one story to piece it all together. So as they go, it gets more and more complex, and they try to find something that can make sense of it all. But as they go, a sort of more present issue shows up,
Okay.
Yeah. Sort of, it deals with kind of mental health kind of stuff. Okay. So that kind of complicates things.
So this is the remount. If somebody was to have seen Slip before, as opposed to now, are there differences that they would see?
It's all lasers now. Yeah, exactly. Haunt first. Differences are that we did a good amount of rewriting. Okay. So, I mean, it's not if you saw the show, it would be quite recognizable from the previous, but we've tweaked it a lot. We fine tuned it a bit. I just think it's a much tighter script and a tighter show. So that to me is it's really nice to come back to a show because I haven't done a remount of this is comedic, but it's not like a Sex Rex show that I usually work on that is just pure comedy. Yeah. So this one, to sort of go back and dig in again, I feel like the actors have been finding lots of new material in it and new honesty in it, and I think that's really, really exciting to bring. And I should say that the original cast of 5, Paloma Nunez, couldn't come back because she's on Second City main stage, but we did get Nicole Stamp to show up, who actually has been on Second City main stage in the past. So,
what was it like returning to the material? Were there things that didn't work that you wanted to tweak? Just as it was performed, you saw things that could be improved. What was the impetus to revisit it?
Well, certainly every time we do a show, there's stuff we want to change, and we're pretty flexible and pretty quick, so we do change most of those things as we go. And even sometimes during a run, we'll make tweaks. Nothing big, but word changes and line changes here and there. And the show's collaboratively created, right? So it's not like a single writer making choices. The cast is everybody's making the choices. Yeah, more or less. I mean, I couldn't fully articulate what the power structure is, but I mean, I'm directing. I'm sort of head writing, but with Danny Padgett and Michaela Dyke are my sort of core conspirators on it, and then who did most of us three did most of the sitting down and writing, and then with the cast, though, we really did create the world together. So there is a lot of input from everybody. It just usually means one of the three of us, Danny, Michaela, and I, sits down and does the writing. Right. But then in rehearsal we go, this line doesn't work, let's change it, blah, 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 let's add this, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, doing that was quite challenging with a mystery, because we didn't really know until we opened if it made sense, if it was a satisfying ending, if all those if it was, you have to balance subtlety with clarity, and that's quite challenging, because usually you just want to make things really clear, I think, the whole time, and this time you actually want some opacity in it to trick your audience and to have them engage in the fun of figuring it out. So that wasn't, we didn't know if it worked or not until we opened. And so to come back, yes, we can.
Yeah. So what was that like, opening that and not knowing if it worked?
I feel like that's how all my shows go. I should say we did 3 drafts of it before we started rehearsals. Okay. And so the rehearsal, the show you saw in January would be like a 4th draft kind of show. It meant that our first draft is always a hot mess. Just
as the first draft often is.
Exactly, and should be. It's just research, really. Research in the guise of a draft. The second draft was kind of close-ish to what it ended up being. And then the third draft I actually wrote on the plane to Costa Rica. I took all the changes and I was like, I don't want to do this on my vacation, so and did it. And then sent it off. And I think by that point I was like, okay, this actually makes sense. Okay. It's not hot nonsense. I know that much. But and then I felt pretty confident that there would be something in it. And I think I don't know, I guess I just trust myself now enough to know that I wouldn't present something that was a total mess. Right. So, and that would at least be pretty good. And I think it surpassed that, and getting people's feedback, it's just helpful to go, okay, because there's some things that, you can tip the balance on giving away what it is by 1 or 2 words. and we just have to be careful. Like, that's something that's hard to assess. So hearing that it was pretty effective overall, like, obviously we tweaked some things, and of course, but like, that was the thing that wasn't known.
Sure. Yeah, I've had a couple of times with new shows when I was working with Keystone Theater, and everything we do in like a room, we're creatively creating it. We don't actually know. Like, it's funny to us.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or at least it was when we started it. And then you hit that point, you know, when you're like, we're not laughing anymore. Is it still funny?
Well, and that gets tricky.
Yeah.
We find that with sex directs too, because then you have to be wary, because you will then probably find a joke that's funnier to you in the room, and you laugh uproariously at it, but then you realize it's actually a build on the original joke, and you can do that second joke, but you need the first order.
You need the first joke
in the show, at least, to make the other one work. So
I've had many premieres of one of those backstage, like just sort of gritting my teeth until I hear the first anything.
And it's funny with this show. It starts out pretty comedic. It's kind of like they argue over points over who's the better detective, literally over a dead body. Like, it's sort of silly, but then as things go on, it gets more emotionally kind of rich. And if viewers, I think that's what's fun. If you've seen it before, or if you watch it more than once, you actually see all the plants earlier on that reveal what happens in the end.
Nice.
So that's quite satisfying.
That's cool. What was this murder mystery? This idea, the procedural. Where did that come from? In terms of the original idea.
I'm so glad you asked, because it started because we were. I think it was mostly Michaela and I who had the first kind of conversation about it, and it was just I was just like, I hadn't done my own play for a little while because I was working in film for a bit, and I was like, I want to get back. And the Box Theatre in Toronto, where we originally did it, was available, and we looked at the space, and we booked it, and we were like, let's build a show for this space.
Okay.
And then we kind of brainstormed like what could be there. And I had been there before for a reading or something. And have you been in the space, or?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's real spooky. It's on Niagara, off Bathurst. And it's kind of like an old industrial sort of part of town. It actually used to be a coffin factory. Okay. And we had mentioned that in the show. But so you go in, and then to get into the space, you go under like this underpass thing, like built into the like a little tunnel built into the building, and then you go around to this like factory door, and it's an old warehouse. So then you go in, and you have to buzz in often, and it's just like it's super spooky. So when I first went in, I was like, am I in the right place? Like, am I just gonna get mugged? Like, I was just genuinely like, oh, I shouldn't be here. And so Michaela and I were like, well, what would you find here if you just walked in and it wasn't a theater venue? What would be here? And we're like, there for sure would be a dead body. Like, absolutely. And we kind of came onto this thing about it being like an abandoned apartment, someone sort of squatting in it, and kind of going from there. We brainstormed a dozen or so ideas. And then there was another. We wanted to explore that, and then there was another issue, I guess, related to mental health. Is my roundabout way of talking about it, that we sort of had that we thought would be really interesting to explore through a procedural form. Because that's kind of what we try to do, I think, with most of our shows, is we try to find a genre that people know, and then we try to add something else to it, to not just to make it more interesting, but I feel like in our like write up stuff, we talk about like genre as a lens of looking at things, and generally genres have common topics that they look at, and so you kind of get the same perspective on those topics. But if you use a genre to look at a topic you don't usually look at, then you get different perspectives on it. And I think that's really cool and exciting.
What's interesting is because usually when you would think about a police procedural, and the police procedural would be dealing with a serious topic, it would be like, I don't know, a very special episode. It always comes across as kind of treacly or self-important and never quite works. It's interesting to take that into theater, and I think what I find,
don't get me wrong, it doesn't work here.
No. What I find intriguing about it is that in this particular instance, the whole procedural, instead of like being that separation between you and your television, which is safe, is now you're in a room with the dead body and the cops, and you're on either side.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting spot to put an audience for this kind of thing.
Totally, yeah. We were pretty deliberate on that. We had thought about... I should say, it's funny because some of that is just from the confines of the space. Mm-hmm. I don't think the space worked well in a proscenium format. And you could fit more people. And that's sort of how we started it. And then from there, though, when you're sitting on two sides... and their chairs are basically right against the walls. Mm-hmm. So they're in the room. Yeah. There's a lot, and the actors are kind of just doing their thing in the middle. There's less of a wall, so you are, I think, more immersed in that world. Yeah. And, you come in the original production, you would wait in this lobby, mm-hmm. and there'd be police tape on the door, and then I'd rip it open and let people in, and there's a dead body. And then... Mm-hmm. It starts, and they're sitting around, and they're all looking at it. And it's funny, everyone's looking around, trying to figure out what happened themselves, right off the get-go. I do think it makes it kind of more immersive, more without being like a Tyson March show or something where you're actually doing more engagement.
It's interesting that the idea of how close the actors are to the audience. They're right up against the wall. That layer of safety that a proscenium would give them is kind of gone there.
Totally. And there's a moment in the first act, which I don't mind spoiling, which is the coroner comes and they inspect the body briefly before taking it away to autopsy it. So they come in, and he has a tarp or a body bag, and they lay it down, and they pick up the dead actor and put her on the tarp and then wrap her up and take her out. And it's very fun to watch audiences watch that, because there's dialogue going on still, and it's a bit bantery, but fun, so it's not super heavy, but everyone's just going like staring at
because it's not a thing that we normally get, that we normally see. That part of the procedural happens, usually in the procedural on TV, the body is already in the bag on the stretcher and gets pushed away. You're like, it's either that's done, you see it die, you see it at the crime scene, or you see it at the morgue. I think it's also on a screen, that medium gives you sight and sound, right? But here you get a little bit more tactile feel. You see the weight of this actor as they have to lift them up and they have to move them, and it's awkward and difficult. And I don't know, it's creepy. You get a creepier sense of I have to move a dead body, yucko. So I think that's fun. You were talking earlier about how one of the things that you like to do is give people what they think they're going to see, and then sort of twist that. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about where that comes from for you?
I'm a sneaky bastard. I don't know. I think it's where does it come from? What makes me want to do that?
What is your impetus for that? What is it that sort of draws you towards that sort of thing?
Well, I think it's a couple things. One, I think that if you enter a show with an idea of showing one thing and then having there be something else, you're probably going to have a wider experience for your audience. Because if I just did a procedural, they would have a spooky show. It would be creepy and it would be mystery, and that would be fun, and that's great, sure. But by also adding this sort of emotional content, then there's something else that you get to explore. I think is one thing. I think it's part of that balance of striking accessibility versus maybe depth. So just trying to find that intersection between something that everybody could enjoy and also something that is trying to say something. I guess. I'm trying to think of. Because if you go super art house kind of style, then you might lose a lot of people. And if you go pure action movie, then it doesn't really change people.
It doesn't change people. It doesn't really say anything other than, isn't this cool?
Yeah, exactly. Captain America's biceps are amazing, which is very important.
The one thing that I do think is that sort of thing, it has its place. That whole...
Totally, absolutely.
Pure action, this is cool.
I enjoy the Jason Bourne movies. They are fun movies. They are thrillers. They just do that well. Or John Wick is just an excellent action movie and has no other content. But it's great. It's and then I feel finally all that amounts to to me, part of the point of theater and art and stuff is to get into that deep emotional area and to kind of break people's hearts and crack them open and have people open to more emotionally rich experiences. So. Yeah. But most people don't want to do that. They don't want to, like, I probably, I probably don't. Yeah.
It's like, if you tell them that that's what's going to happen, they don't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
If you just sort of let that happen, you draw them in with something that, like, they think, oh, this is what it's going to be, and then you twist it in something else. They willingly went along with it, and
now you have to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's so much more rewarding than if you just sort of know this is going to get really emotional and teach you something.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If your flyer is like, "Hey, come cry a bunch," you're like, "No thanks." But if it's like, "Ooh, cool cop mystery," they're like, "Oh, that's fun," and then they leave, be like, "What happened? Why?"
Yeah.
So there's a phrase Kat Sandler's used where she's like, because she often does something comedic and then. Very often tragic endings, and she's like, she said something like they have to pay for the laughs, or something that you have to pay for the comedy that you got at the start.
Yeah, so. I had something like I did a show at Hamilton Fringe this past summer, and it was sort of like a similar thing. Bring them in with this is the amusing concept. So you think it's just going to be a nice light thing or a discussion about this, and then I'm going to punch you in the gut. Like about halfway through. Yeah, so it's like very much like. You're going to get those laughs, but you pay for it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has working with Sex T-Rex informed the way that you create theater that's not straight up comedy?
I yell louder. It's funny you should ask that because, yes, of course. And I think part of that experience is one of the things that influenced me being a collaborative creator, because that's a pretty collaborative room. It certainly has pushed me to be more physical and try to find ways to tell. Like, most of the stuff is narrative for sure, but I think every show I do has some physical or less narrative component to it, or less just purely verbal component, because I think that's a really interesting form to include. I think the best example was a show we did, Dark Matter, in 2014. That was a sci-fi adaptation of Heart of Darkness, and we did it with no set and no props, and we just did it with the sort of comedy techniques of mime and stuff that you do, but it was a mostly serious play. I mean, there's comedy in it as well, but generally about existential space sadness, so kind of darker themes, and that was like really deliberately being like, let's see if we can use these things in this format. So yeah, certainly, and I think it also sharpens. They're all very funny, so I think it sharpens my own sort of comedic sensibilities. And
because the work that Sex T-Rex does is very cinematic. It does more with less than you would find in most straight up comedy shows.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because in the Sex T-Rex shows, we absolutely are following a cinematic sort of genre plotline. Of course, it's sort of genre parody, but then it's trying to do it really visually. Like, that's a lot of the content of it, and the fun is how do we put the action movie on stage. And we've done that once with a Circlesnake show of Special Constables, which was basically treating the TTC cops like homicide police. It was very silly, but for me, because I'm often doing dramatic work, or at least more so dramatic work than physical comedy, we're more taking the cinematic structure and genre and stuff, and sort of taking that kind of plot style, and then finding that sort of theatrical intersection somewhere else. So yeah,
when you were going from comedy to, I don't want to say tragedy, but something more serious. Are there particular things that you take from the comedy to bring into the more straight drama?
Jokes. No, really though, but really, one of the things I really like about Step is that it is pretty funny to start, and we keep jokes throughout, and the characters are cops, so they're like, I wouldn't say the most emotionally open characters in the world. So some of the ways they deal with stuff is through humor, and so I feel like to divide those experiences of something being funny and something being sad is arbitrary. A lot of the time, I remember having to put my cat down, and my family were crying, and then making a joke about turning into a rug, and then crying again.
Of course, yeah.
So that, I think that gets at an honest experience. I also think that it it gets audiences engaged. If we're just like somber and serious the whole time,
they don't have a way in.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a way of opening the door, and that's one of the reasons we're actually deliberately more comedic in our first act.
I also think that having a laugh makes the sad or the more serious aspects even more serious.
Yeah.
Just by the juxtaposition, the word that I'm having difficulty
juxtaposition.
saying.
Yeah,
the one.
That's the one. Well, it's funny. That's actually, I believe, empirically validated through mental psychology courses, which is that effectively you would habituate to whatever emotion you're feeling. So if you see a show that's sad, and the whole thing is sad from beginning to end, and I've seen shows like this, and you go first 10 minutes like, man, this is really sad. The next 10 minutes like, okay. And the last time it's like, I'm so bored.
Yeah.
So you do habituate. So to have people move from different experience to different experience, it will make each individual one, I think, richer and deeper, more full. I also think with the comedy, and especially Sexy Rex, as much as it's a bunch of dumb idiots waving our arms around, it's also really founded on clarity, right?
Yeah. So
that's something that I try to often keep in mind when I'm doing my own shows, and especially a physical piece. I'm like, how can I make this as simple as possible?
Yeah.
I think the thing I miss when I'm out of a comedy and into a drama is that with a comedy, like, although you have ideally real characters with real motivations and all that stuff, and you're trying to follow a realistic or like an engaging plot, you can always do something really dumb.
Yes.
If you make it really dumb, you can kind of go anywhere. So I find it a little easier to follow a plot structure that I want. Whereas with the drama, I'm like, okay, what would change this character realistically to go here? Right. Whereas in the other one, they can just be like, they just really like dragons and they will do anything to whatever it is, so something kind of stupid. It's fun.
Can we talk a little bit about how your studies in psychology have affected the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
First off, what drew you to psychology?
So just to clarify, I'm doing a master's in psychology to your program at Adler. Not Stella Adler, but it's a very rare program. No, so I'm in my first year there, and in terms of what drew me to it, my mom is actually a psychologist, and she does cognitive behavioral therapy. So I've sort of grown up in that milieu for a while, and they've run workshops and stuff, so I've sort of been exposed to it for a while. And it's always informed my work. And the short version is I was working in the film industry, and it wasn't quite right for me. And I sort of always knew that I was going to go into therapy at some point, and then I was like, why not now? And so I did, yeah.
When you say that you always knew that you were going to be doing that, was that just like from a kid? You always knew that was something you were going to end up in, or?
I think more as a young adult. I think as a kid, I kind of took it for granted because, okay, so my mom didn't do therapy on me or something like that, but obviously she has a psychological way of looking at things, and so I just sort of grew up with that framework. So it was just sort of that's just how my mom was, right? And it was only as a young adult I sort of looked back and was like, oh, that's that thing. And I think coming out of, I graduated from a film school, and I was like, I figured I was going to give the industry a try, and I did. And I was sort of like, in my back pocket was, if it all goes to shit, I'll just go become a therapist. I can just go do that. And then I just I was working in post-production, and I just wasn't for me. So I just wanted to switch out. Yeah.
So you just decided this was the time to do it.
Yeah, and a big issue is with the film stuff, you're often working 10, 12 hours a day, and your contracts can be 6 weeks to a year. Yeah. And my idea was to do a contract for editing to make money and then do theater and stuff. But I just found when I was on the editing contract, it was too much time to do anything else.
I have a friend who does editing, and she's... I don't see her. I don't see her. I see her once in a while.
You had a friend. Yes.
I had a friend.
Yes, exactly.
Once in a while, when there's some kind of break or something, I may see her.
And
then I don't see her again for 6 months.
Yep. Yeah. And so that wasn't right for me, and they're not. The film industry isn't about work-life balance. So therapy is. So it can be anyway. So.
What have you learned in the psychology that applies to directing or writing?
Well, it's actually funny. my directing, I think, has always been formed by therapy. And we were talking about this a bit earlier, but like especially from a cognitive behavioral approach, like the way that a therapist works with a client, I find really similar to the way that a director works with an actor. Not that I'm trying to solve my actor's emotional problems, but that you are trying to elicit emotional change in somebody else without telling them what to do or feel or think, but by helping them figure it out for themselves through like Socratic dialogue or guided discovery or stuff like that. So I found that really helpful. And then more specifically, sometimes we have used psychological frameworks to explore character. So Dark Matter is a good example where there's a character who effectively had post-traumatic stress disorder from some pretty traumatic violent event. And I actually looked at a model for how PTSD operates, and we went, okay, rather than fixing it, let's create it. We kind of went, what would be the sort of recurring imagery that comes up? What are the flashback moments? What's the stuck point that you can't get past? Things like that. So we actually kind of built it through role playing and stuff. What that would be like, and then again in Queen's Conjurer, did you talk to us about that? Did you see it? Or no. Okay, so in that show, one of the characters is a historical figure, Edward Kelly, and he was really hard to understand. His motivations would change so much. He was always back and forth. Really erratic guy. Had visions of angels, and you would have think maybe he's psychotic or something, but it was kind of accepted at the time to do that, to see angels. So we actually talked to my girlfriend, who's also becoming a psychologist and specializes in borderline personality disorder, and we kind of looked at it, like, oh, that actually kind of fits. And through that, we went, oh, he makes so much more sense now. Sort of dubbed as like an emotional burn victim, like he's been really emotionally hurt before. So that was really helpful for getting to writing that character, and then ultimately for Josh Brown to perform it too. So I feel like it's always there. And then very broadly, you're just trying to, both fields are just trying to understand why people do what they do.
People do what they do, yeah. Have there been any revelations in actually studying psychology, that things that you didn't quite... I mean, obviously there must have been some, but any that sort of related to like writing or directing? Things that you didn't know that suddenly snapped into place because of the studies?
I mean, that moment with Edward Kelly, I think, is a good example of that. That was new. I think, for me, it's kind of the biggest stuff is the therapeutic skills, and sort of the ones that you do in most any approach, like listening and empathy and being present. Those things, I think, are really integral to my directing work, like what I'm like in the room. So, often, especially because I'm producing too, I can be stressed, I can be concerned and thinking about other things, and then I have to kind of go, no, okay, let's be present. I'm just in the room, just watching. And also, helping to work with an actor, they get stressed out and concerned about stuff, and, sometimes they have an issue that sometimes you just deal with it at face value and that's what it is, and sometimes it's like they don't want to change this, they're actually stressed out about something else, and you can explore a bit. So I think it just makes me, hopefully, better to work with. And and to me, it's really important to get the best out of my actors. Like, that's like... Of course. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So if I can get that out of an actor, I'm really happy with the work I've done. So I think the therapeutic stuff, not that I'm going into an actor's personal life necessarily, not at all, unless they really wanted to use that, I don't know, but that's complicated. Anyway, but overall, like just working in alliance with an actor to really dig deeper, I think really helps.
So you're studying psychology, getting your master's. You're going to do therapy. You're going to do that. What do you foresee? What do you envision your life like when you're done? Like as a theater creator, therapist, how do you envision that? Like, ideally, what does that look like?
I mean, ideally, as close to Gandalf as possible, obviously.
Always.
Or I suppose Dumbledore now that I'm reading Harry Potter. But Well, I don't know. I feel like they would really. I think they'll just continue to inform each other. I'm only starting with clients in May, so I'll see. I'm really excited to see how that.
Yeah.
Because therapists, they always say you learn so much from your clients, and I really think that I will. I think I'll just. Ideally, I just feel like I would have a really, really good understanding of people and why they do what they do, and I think that would, transfer to my work with my actors, and then my work as a writer, figuring stuff out, and then ultimately transmit that to an audience too, to I don't know, explore characters that seem incomprehensible otherwise, or find depths in people you don't usually see. Like, I think that would be really interesting, and more pragmatically, like I would be working part-time as a 20 hours a week as a therapist, and the rest as a theater person.
I sort of wonder if like being a therapist is like similar to being like a massage therapist, where you can only realistically see so many in a day before you're just spent.
Yes, that is absolutely the case. People like if you were working full time, you're working 40 hours a week, right, as a normal job, but you can't. Like a full time therapist will see like 20 clients a week max, like give or take.
Yeah,
that's quite a lot.
I would think that's a lot. To do.
And, some of those are just might be a fun conversation.
Sure.
A lot will not.
A lot will not. Right? You have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned how you're reading Harry Potter now, and
this is for the fans.
One of the interesting things for me is a lot of the work that Sex T-Rex does is based in pop culture tropes and things like that. Now, there hasn't been like a Wizards play for Sex T-Rex, but because the things that Sex T-Rex tends to touch are so founded in pop culture. Yeah. What is it that like? Was there something that kept you away from Harry Potter until now, or?
You mean as a reader?
As a reader.
Oh, I see. So, like, if I'm often working in pop culture, why have I not read an enormous piece of pop culture?
Just curious.
Okay, so here's the real story. I did when I was 10 or 11. I read the first 2 books, and I think I am more close to the same age as Harry Potter, like as it came out. And then I read the whole Lord of the Rings when I was like 13. And I loved it. I was so as obsessed with it then as I am now. And then the first 2 books of Harry Potter are pretty kiddie, they're pretty sort of whimsical and silly and whatever. I mean, looking back, delightful. But as a overly serious 11-year-old, you want to read the kid stuff, you want to read the adult stuff. So I just stopped. And then I think everyone was so into it that I found it hard to get on the bandwagon because people were just too. I just found it a little much, and I think I, as a kid and teenager, are a bit more contrarian than I am now. So, I just kind of never did it. And then, as I became more openly obsessed with wizards and did a play about a wizard, people were like, "How have you not read Harry Potter?" And I was like, "This is a very good question." So, I started, and it's delightful. And,
I've been following your posts.
Yes, Manta Boy Wiz.
And I was curious about the delay, the quote unquote delay in reading it, but also it seems like you're. I mean, obviously, you're discovering the depth in it, and I think you posted at one point about like crying at the Dumbledore death or something, and
that's right.
That's like the kind of thing that young 7-year-old Alec probably you don't even think that book is going to get to that point or anything.
Well, the first 2 books don't really.
No,
so I didn't anticipate it.
No, of course, yeah. They're very light, and you think, okay, so this what this series is going to be.
That's right.
Yeah. What's sort of interesting about from a certain point of view, that's that twist in the play, like this is what it's going to be.
Right.
Draw you in with this is light and easy, and then hit you with some more complicated stuff down the road.
Quite right. I mean, hey, any comparisons you want to make from my work to Harry Potter, I'll take. So.
Absolutely. It's exactly like exactly like Harry Potter.
The cops are wizards. Well, also. That could be a thing, there's also, it's also, I mean, in the Harry Potter books, pretty much every one, it's like, she's a mystery writer, really, and it is a whole mystery, and the last 100 pages wrap it up, and in many of those books, it is in that wrap up that you get the sort of darker revelations of what was going on, and certainly at the end of book 4 when a character dies.
Yeah.
That to me is like a huge turning point of darkness.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It is sort of a slap of, this was a fun kids book, and now everyone you've ever loved is dead. So.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely does provide a bit of a shock to the reader, because we're not used to, especially in
young adult
fiction, but also a lot of times in popular culture, we're not used to a main character or a character that we like dying. I mean, Game of Thrones changes that sort of thing, and Joss Whedon was doing that kind of thing for you.
Right.
But generally,
agreed,
you don't think about, oh, this character that I like could die.
Yeah.
I don't think where I was going with that, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Coming back to Slip.
Mm-hmm.
The remount, which opens on technically Friday, but you're opening on have a preview on Thursday.
That's right. So March 23rd preview opens 24th and closes on April 2nd. So it's only a 10-day run.
Is it at the box again, or is it?
No, it's at the Tarragon.
At the Tarragon,
at their Workspace.
You're doing it in the same.
That's right.
Other side.
That's right.
Nice. Yeah. So with that remount, you said you found you had to find a different actor for one of the roles. Mm-hmm. And so much that's rewritten. Are there lessons that you learned from the original one that you're applying to this one, aside from just the rewrites? Are there things that the audience taught you?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And things like that.
That's a great question. I mean, yes, it would be a little hard to articulate because after the show we did a postmortem and sort of assessed what are the things we want to improve, and they were generally just like kind of just heightening but furthering the concept that we had and just landing it more clearly. I think overall the first show was successful. I mean, not like I mean, overall audiences were really really quite liked it, but there wasn't anything that I recall that was like, oh, this needs to drastically change. It's funny because it's a mystery and it only kind of comes clear by the end. People develop a lot of sort of fan theories as they go. And I think we might now... There is a fan theory sort of that we have sort of... I think if you had that theory in the first one, you'd probably have it more so in this one.
Okay.
Even if it might not be what we think actually happened. But that's kind of fun to play with. It was kind of like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Why don't we poke that idea a bit more? And
something that I find really interesting is the idea of in movies and television. There's a lot of hand-holding.
Yes.
There's a lot of like make sure that everybody understands everything, that this is what we mean.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for like allowing your audience to have their own opinion and to feel free enough that you're okay with the audience having a different opinion than you do.
I have a different opinion than my lead actress on what happens right after the blackout at the end. Very drastically different. And I don't mind because the blackout's where the blackout is.
Yeah.
And I don't think it doesn't like the way that she plays it doesn't totally interrupt the way I see it. And so I'm just like, great, if that's how you see it, cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fun.
It's really fun to be secure enough in your work to have the audience just make their own choice, or even another actor make their own choice, and you don't have to be right about that.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Is the fan theory something that is in the show, or is it just something that like there are people who had this theory and they could still have this theory now?
Yeah.
Do you believe this theory, or is this
nope.
like nope? Even better.
Nope. No, I don't, because we have, because it was a mystery, we had to construct really literally what happened. So that's what I see in it. Does the other theory hold up? Maybe it does. Like you could, I think you could, there's probably enough in the text that you could read that in it. But yeah, I don't know, and I feel like that. I think that is, I was talking before about the balance of like subtlety and clarity, and I think that. Because if you go pure subtlety, then you kind of end up with nothing. If it's just all amorphous, unclear what it is, you just have a messy show. You don't know what it is. And if it's pure clarity, then and there's no ambiguity, then you have a normal procedural, really, which is like, this is what happened, we figured it out, it's done.
Right.
And I feel like most of the really good work that we like, you follow the story, but there's questions throughout that keep you engaged. I mean, even without spoiling stuff, even in the new Logan movie, there's a lot of backstory in it that they imply, but they don't actually tell you.
They don't actually tell you anything.
Yeah, and I had there's good debates with people after what happened. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
fun.
Absolutely. It was one of the fun things. What was that Guillermo del Toro movie with the fairies and the...
Pan's Labyrinth?
Pan's Labyrinth?
Yeah.
I debated with people for ages after that movie about what that ending was. And they were like two factions and stuff, you know. And it's great to have that when you leave a theater.
And I think it's important that you... Like, it's interesting when there are sort of two factions or maybe three perspectives, because that to me implies that there's like a substantial body of evidence that can be interpreted different ways. Whereas if you have 40 theories, you're like, okay, there's probably not actually enough of a spine to that story to make sense.
But I also love the fact that, like, if there's a debate after, like, people were invested in what you did enough to, like, argue about it or to have an opinion about it.
Well, that was actually what was kind of, I think, some of the faith that we were holding on to in the process, which was, like, you know, when we were concerned, like, does it work? I hope this is, engaging. Does the mystery make sense? It's like, we start with a dead body on the floor, and there's cops trying to figure it out. Yeah. So the promise is, figure out what happened to this body.
Right.
And it's really hard as an audience member not to just focus on that. You know, you just get so fixated on, like, there's fun in a mystery. You want to know what happened.
Yeah.
And that kind of hook, people get really into it. So I think that's part of what carries through the show, too, as well.
Well, in terms of creating a mystery for the stage, which, I mean, mystery novelists, you know, they have their way of working. Yeah. And some people will say that once they have read a novelist, like a mystery writer for a while, they know their tricks and can figure it out.
I feel that a little bit with the Harry Potter books,
When you are creating a mystery for the stage like this, was your starting point like, here's a dead body, what happened, or here's what could happen in this room? What was the starting point, and how did you construct a well-constructed mystery around it?
Well, we did start with what happens in this room, and we tried to get pretty literal in, like, what you could do there, and because in the original production we played the space as the space, you know, and then from there we did go, yes, there's a dead body, how did it get here, kind of thing. And so because we had improvisers and actors, we just kind of we started with the victim's story, and we improvised a bunch of their characters and who they were, and we built, like, it's funny, there's sort of only a smattering of scenes from that person's life, but there's a wealth of stuff that we had that we just put on a shelf because we had to, like, because you're sort of looking through little windows in the show to see that story, that we had to build what it was before we could find the pieces that would be ambiguous enough to fulfill what the cops think it is versus what it actually is. So yeah, we started with the victim's life, built that, and then put the cop stuff on top of that, and sort of then started, after we did those two layers, we sort of kept working with interactions between those kind of thing. So.
And did you know starting what the mystery was? The radio air quotes. Did you know what the mystery was at the beginning, or did you have to discover that through what the victim's life was?
Like, did we know how she died at the beginning?
Like, the answer to the mystery? Did you know that when you started, or was that
not really?
You worked backwards, or you worked forwards?
We worked through the victim's life. We sort of knew because we sort of already had this, like, a certain topic that we were interested in exploring. Part of my vagueness, but a certain topic we knew it was going to involve that topic, and then it was a big question of how does that actually happen. Sure. And how would it happen in this person's life, and what does that look like? So we had an idea. I definitely remember there's a lot of sadness as well in this show, and there's like a number of moments when we were working together, especially like sometimes Danny McCann and I, when we're coming up with maybe this happens, maybe this happens, and going along, and it's always like, oh, what did this happen? Oh my god, and then that, oh Jesus, and like we're just full on crying, just like, oh god, like that's horrible. So we're like, put that in, yum 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 yum. we had some idea, but it took a lot of exploration. And I mean, I can't speak highly enough of this cast, but they just brought so much of, not necessarily themselves in their personal life, but just like gave so much to the process,
right.
and really, really did build it together.
What's the rehearsal process for this kind of collective thing look like? Even with the remount, in terms of how long you've been working on it.
Yeah.
What is that length of time?
For this remount?
Yeah.
It's about a month. It's sort of a normal-ish rehearsal process. Yeah, this is, which is interesting. I haven't really done that for a while. There's not the same amount of sheer terror. So this is more just like, this is how the show is, and let's make it work. But because it was a year ago that we did the original, give or take, we're trying to enter it with, we're not just trying to go, we probably could have said, learning lines, hop up, do it.
Right.
But we were trying to be honest with it and really explore the process again and truly revisit these characters, and find them again. So it ended up being sort of a normal-ish rehearsal process.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And we can find information about Slip on, what's the website?
Easiest is www.circlesnake.com.
Sure.
That's the name of the company. It's on if you Google Tarragon Slip, it's on their page as well.
Cool.
And tickets are available through both of those places.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Circlesnake is on Twitter?
Yes, it is, at Circlesnake.
And you're on Twitter?
At Alec Toller, _Toller. If you search hashtag man to boy whiz, you'll find a lot of Harry Potter jokes and eventually me. So,
all right.
yeah.
Cool.
One other just fun thing with the show is it's really exciting because we got nominated for a bunch of these My Entertainment World awards.
Yeah.
Including Best Production, Best New Work, and Best Actress for our lead, Alex Paxton Beasley. And it's fun because we get to do the show sort of a week before the awards.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is, it's such a rarity to get to do a remount before that. So
because usually it's like so far in the past.
Yeah. People are like, what was that show? So it's, it's so rare that as an audience member or someone who goes to those awards maybe to get to see any of those shows, you go, that show happened? What? I didn't see it. So I think that's a really cool opportunity to get to see it. And it's a 10-day run. It's super short. So, FOMO, guys. Gotta avoid that FOMO.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for chatting.